Profits in Divorce. This is podcast series number 2, and I am a certified divorce financial analyst and president of Collaborative Divorce Strategies here in Rhode Island. And we're a firm that specializes in divorce planning and mediation for both individuals and couples who are going through the divorce process. And ultimately, our goal is to help you figure out and understand all the potential financial outcomes of your divorce, know what your potential future income and expenses may be, and ultimately make good financial decisions now that will add value to your life later on after you've settled. So today we're going to be covering home ownership and financial independence in divorce, and I have a very special guest with me here today. Her name is Beverlee Fairbanks. She's a certified divorce lending professional with Washington Trust, and today we're going to be talking about most likely what is the biggest asset that you're looking to negotiate on, which is your marital home. And Beverlee and I have worked extensively with clients jointly, and we're going to be discussing what exactly Beverlee does and also give you some scenarios of cases that we've worked on to help you avoid some future potential pitfalls. So welcome, Beverlee.
Thank you.
Why don't you give us a little bit of background of what you do?
Sure. A certified divorce lending professional. I'm basically certified in all lending areas with mortgage financing and helping the consumer understand their mortgage strategies post-divorce. It's my role essentially is to help the consumer. That's really where I come in. I typically work alongside the divorce attorney in helping the consumer understand their options post-divorce, negotiate, as you know, Jane, post-divorce, all the mortgage and financial options.
Obviously, this is a work in progress, one that should be addressed early on in the process because there are a lot of things to consider when you're looking at your marital home, whether you're looking to buy your spouse out, whether you're looking to both agree to sell the home, or if you're looking to potentially downsize and have your spouse buy you out. Let's look at 3 different considerations and scenarios that we've worked on in the past. Number 1 is determining the support to be used as qualified income. I know that I was a stay-at-home mom for a short period of time. Beverlee, you've also been divorced, and I come across a lot of clients who are considered quote-unquote the out spouse. And what that means is they've either been underemployed or out of the workforce for quite some time caring for their family, and now they're looking at potentially buying another property. And that presents some issues because number 1, you don't have a current income. And number 2, how do you effectively do that if you haven't had a steady stream of income over the course of the years? So, Bev, let's talk about the stay-at-home mom or someone who's underemployed and some of the challenges that they've faced.
Absolutely. Determining whether the income is alimony or child support and whether it's considered qualified income for a mortgage is very important. And just to reiterate, equally important, if not more important, for the stay-at-home mom, if this is their only source of income after divorce. There is a rule in mortgage financing. It's called the 636, and we've experienced this first hand, Jane, with some of our clients, where in order to use the income, you would have to have received it for 6 months, and it has to continue for 36 months in order to be used as qualified income for a mortgage. We've used this to negotiate settlements where they were only potentially going to get 2 years of alimony or 2.5 years or whatever the case may be.
Critical part of this process is really figuring out, number 1, what your needs are. So early on in the process, when I work with clients, we do a lot of budgeting, and we look at the current scenario for their budget, and we project out what their proposed budget may be if they're looking at downsize. And Beverlee is critical in this process because we help determine, or she helps us determine, what their new mortgage would cost and what they need for a down payment. So early on, we address this, and it actually helps clients back into some good financial decisions right from the get-go. Maybe they realize they can't afford to stay in the marital home after all, or this could greatly affect their future if they do decide to stay in the home and it's far too expensive for them. We get ahead of the curve by figuring this out early on, and then we help your lawyer craft your settlement appropriately so that you're protected long term. And I know that I've worked with a couple clients who've been stay-at-home moms, and they're looking at new houses throughout the process, and they've realized, well, okay, I can't afford to stay in my home. I want to downsize. But in order to qualify for the mortgage, I have to have a temporary order put in place from my attorney. And the attorney can then draft some orders to say, okay, have husband pay wife X amount of dollars on a temporary basis so that she can then qualify for a home before the settlement is agreed to. So this is very critical. This is something that we get ahead of the curve on early on, and we can help you eventually reach that goal of downsizing.
Absolutely, Jane. And one of the biggest myths with that is you can actually prepare the property settlement agreement and have it signed prior to the divorce being final. This happens more times than not. So you can settle on your property and get your, marital home in place, whether you're selling or maintaining prior to divorce. And this is, as you know, has come into play in many, many cases. You don't have to be fully divorced in order to make that change early on.
Just a side note, another potential pitfall that I've come up against is spouses who have variable income. So in other words, they have a base salary of, say, $75,000. But then at the end of the year, they receive a bonus of $250,000. That makes it very difficult to base support. And throughout the process, I work with them and their attorneys to figure out what the appropriate level of support should be according to their budgetary needs. Again, I can't stress enough that this has to be done early on in the process, and we'll discuss other scenarios as we go on. But secondly, let's talk about another scenario about receiving a spousal buyout and then potentially downsizing. Maybe you want to keep the kids in the same school system. Knowing what you'll receive and how much to put down, what monthly payments will be, are a huge factor in this.
I have found with this particular area, if you can take the what if out of your picture, like, okay, I feel good, I know where I'm going, I know what I can afford, my children are going to be fine, we're going to stay in the same school system. This is a huge relief for most clients. You can agree with that, Jane. It really puts that in perspective and kind of makes it as easier as it can be. And you should be able to determine, my job and my role in this area is to help you determine how much you're going to need for a down payment, what the closing costs are going to be. It just takes all that what ifs out, but helps you to budget, and we do this together in showing you the numbers and having you feel comfortable with this, whether you're moving or staying in the property.
One scenario that comes to mind is that we worked with a client who had quite a bit of equity locked up in the marital home, and then some other assets, but they were all tied up in retirement assets. And of course, you cannot access your retirement accounts prior to age 59 and a half without incurring a penalty on that. So we determined that a spousal buyout was best for her, not only to purchase a new home, but also that extra equity was going to supplement her income over the coming years and give her a more comfortable lifestyle until she got back up on her feet and rematriculated back into the workforce. So, yeah, we work through this process hand in hand. There's constant communication, and we go back and forth on what the best case scenario is per the client's needs.
In this particular case, we actually worked with both clients, which, if there's a mediator, sometimes it makes the whole process a lot simpler and streamlined. And in this particular case, he didn't really show a lot of income, but he was able to to help with the asset portion of it. And if you want, Jane, we can talk a little bit about the alimony on this particular case, where he couldn't necessarily afford to pay her alimony and buy her out of the property. So in lieu of that, he proposed a settlement from the equity, an additional settlement amount from the equity in the property, to buy her out for the alimony, which in turn, helped him qualify. And, it's kind of the help me, help you situation where if I can pay you in a lump sum for alimony, I can qualify to buy you out of the property.
Actually, a last-minute wrinkle in this particular client scenario was the husband had bought wife out and had qualified and done that. And at the last minute, he had also said, listen, I'd like to factor in the capital gains that are going to be due on this property if I ever do decide to do that. So in this particular scenario, they had bought the house for $500,000. The potential current appraised value was $905,000. She was now not going to be an owner on the property. So if in the case of capital gains, there is a per person exclusion of $250,000. On a marital basis, it's $500,000. So now that she's removed from the picture, if he does sell this property down the line, there would be a capital gains tax due. And what he was trying to say was, look, I'd like to factor this into the settlement and, get my share of the capital gains. But, there's some potential pitfalls for this. We have no idea what the actual capital gains due are. That has to be factored in at the time of sale. So that could be 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Secondly, we have no idea what the capital gains rate is going to be. There's a lot of variables there, and the current president has a proposal on the table to change that down the line. So a lot of what-if scenarios to prepare for, a lot of things to think about, and these are the things that we do for you and think about that ahead of time. All right, let's talk about the last scenario, is buying out your spouse.
If you're buying your spouse out of the equity in your home, you need to determine the mortgage payment on that buyout. You need to ensure that it's a viable and affordable option for you moving forward. Your entire picture is going to change financially. So Jane and I really coordinate this very well together and help the consumer understand what their payments are going to be, where they're going to be financially, help them budget for the mortgage, the house expenses itself, and just to make sure that that's going to actually work for you and you're not going to be strapped and stressed. I mean, if that's the case, you need to go to a plan B, but if it works, you just got to go with it.
Right. I can think of one scenario here where I had one spouse buying the other out, and this particular spouse was going to be receiving child support for a few years, and she could afford it now, but in a few years, that was going to be hard for her to make those payments in a few years once that child support went away. So these are the things, again, that we help you budget for and foresee of in the planning piece.
There are so many different mortgage products available that I have to help the client, whether it's a 7-year fixed rate, just to keep them in the property until their children graduate from high school and then sell at that point. We have even gone as far as, using the assets as income in lieu of alimony or child support.
Last but not least, a very important part of the process is looking at your credit and protecting that in the meantime. A lot of clients have joint credit cards with their spouses. It's usually a very emotional time where you and your spouse are not effectively communicating on these expenditures. So how are you to know if your husband or wife is racking up credit card bills as the process is going along? And this could take 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Who knows how long it could take? So how do you protect yourself from the get-go?
It's important to proceed with vigilant credit awareness to protect yourself and your finances as you move forward. Tie up any loose ends. I go through the credit report line by line with my clients in order to determine what's joint, what's individual, what you need to remove yourself from or cancel. Very, very, very important. Whether you refinance cars, whatever the case may be, you really need to take control. The sooner the better on credit.
Credit card companies will not allow you to close out that joint account unless the balance is paid in full. But what you can do is prevent any future purchases and close down from any future use between the two of you, which would be extremely helpful. Because if you rack that credit card bill up, or if your client or if your spouse racks that credit card bill up, guess what? It's divisible as a marital debt down the line. So we don't want you facing that as a surprise unknown down the line where you're saddled with half of that bill or whatever percentage your lawyer negotiates for you. Some takeaways from our session today: involve professionals into the process. It's helpful to get a plan in place to figure out what your future budgeting needs are. Start working on this early in the process so you know what's ahead of you. I can tell you that I have a current case right now where a client tried to get divorced for 2 years. The wife is remaining in the marital home. Husband is paying all the bills. They put the house on the market after their divorce was final, and they've agreed to share in those expenses. And guess what? The house is still on the market 5 months later. The husband can't afford to keep the house. the wife wants out. The whole settlement is hinging on the sale of this marital home, and they could have been already doing this well before the end of their divorce. So I can't stress enough, get involved early on in the process. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jane McAuliffe, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst with Collaborative Divorce Strategies. I hope you join me on my next podcast, which is podcast number 3 of Covering Your Assets in Divorce, and we're going to be talking about defining and making a case for your support with family lawyer Timothy M. Sweet. Find me online at www.collaborativedivorcestrategies.com, on LinkedIn, my name is Jane McAuliffe, or Facebook at Jane McAuliffe or Collaborative Divorce Strategies. Thanks again.